Christ. Thank you, Mark. Be with you. Thank you. Welcome this afternoon. It is good and right that an organ should chime us into this afternoon of organ, both enjoying the music of the organ, but also learning a little bit about it along the way. So on behalf of West Raleigh Presbyterian Church, on behalf of Lloyd, you are very welcome. We are glad and grateful to be gathered here for this afternoon's organ concert. A special welcome to any of those who are joining us for the first time. We are glad and grateful that you are here to enjoy this afternoon of music and of fellowship. Immediately following the recital, there will be a reception in the courtyard, which is just on the other side of these windows. So to find it, you'll go out the back doors and to the left and make a U-turn, and we'll hope you'll join us for a time of fellowship, something cold to drink, and some cookies. With no further ado, come, let us enjoy the music.
Welcome. And don't feel like you have to applause after every piece because your hands may get sore. There are a lot of pieces. So welcome. This is a celebration of this pipe organ built in 1968 by Cassavant. I hope that throughout this hour you will learn some interesting things, not only about this organ, about all pipe organs in general. So first off, you can see pipes, and every pipe that you see makes a sound. When you take, at the end, if you would like to come up, if you walk in this space, you can see inside the organ. There's nothing closed off. You can see all of the pipes, and it's somewhat amazing. Each pipe is built by hand, one by one, and there are almost 1,500 pipes here. So that in itself is quite a feat. And not only are they built by hand, but they're built exactly the way they were in 1500, 1600, 1700. The pipe building process and the organ building process had almost reached its perfection during the time of Bach. Bach probably helped that along because he was not only an organist and a church musician, but a pipe organ inspector and consultant. And he knew all of the pipe organs in that part of Germany where he lived and helped design a lot of them and inspect them. So I think that's something we don't think about when we think about Bach. But the organ is pretty amazing. There are these pipes that you see directly in front to the right here, and right behind me is one of 4 categories of pipes, and this category is called principal. And in your program, you will see on page 2 a specification of all of the ranks of pipes. So everything you see printed there is a rank of pipes. A rank of pipes goes the full length of the organ keyboard, which 61 notes. So if we're going to look at principle 8, and that's over there, and look for the longest pipe, and the longest pipe is the lowest pitch, and the pipe is approximately 8 feet long. And that's the number you see beside of that name in the bulletin there, principle 8, which means principle that's 8 feet long on the lowest note. And of course, they get smaller as you go up. So this is the sound of the low note principle. So this is the basic sound of the organ is the principal sound. There are different names. You'll see several other names called principal and octave, choral bass. All of those are also principal sounds. When an organ builder is designing an organ, he's going to start with that stop because that's the heart of the organ. Everything then grows on top of it. And usually the voicing of the principal stop and principal stops is what gives a particular organ its particular sound, its flavor. So different organs will have sound differently, but it'll be based on that principal stop. So we're going to look at all four. There are four categories, but principal is the first one. And in this first piece, I'm going to play just on one stop. The principal 8, I'll use it in the manuals from here, and here, this principal 8 will be played by the feet. Heinrich Bach was an uncle, distant cousin. He was a relative of J.S. Bach, but a little bit before Johann Sebastian's time. So that was just one stop, principle 8. So when an organist sits down to play, you have nothing. When you sit at the piano, you have piano strings. So when you play the piano keys, you know you're going to hear piano. When you sit at the organ, you play the keys, you have nothing. And you have to decide what sound do you want. And listed there, you see all of the choices that you can make. And normally you start with something that has an 8 beside of it, and then you can build upon that. If we want to make it louder, we can add then additional ranks. So if the 8 foot and the pipe is 8 feet long, then if you make a pipe according to physics of sound, if you cut that cylinder in half and make it 4 feet, the sound goes up 1 octave. And so we have ranks of pipes that will start with the lowest note here and go on up. And consequently, if we go and cut that 4-foot pipe in half, we get a 2-foot pipe, and that will put us then 2 octaves above our original note. So if we were playing the lowest note and we had a 4-foot and we had a 2-foot, with 1 finger, I would be playing 3 pipes. So even on a simple setting or a 4-part chorale, you have 4 parts going, multiply that by 3, you have 12 pipes sounding all the time. So this is how organists then make the sound louder. The pipes themselves don't get any louder. They make 1 sound, 1 pitch. They pretty much just sit there until their time, the air comes in, and they play. So everything, when you hear the organ getting louder, we're not, pushing the loud pedal or anything like that. We're having to furiously find what would be another stop that would add in and make that louder. So in this next piece, we'll demonstrate that somewhat. Luckily, we do have memories in here, so it's just a matter of finding the correct memory, that I have it programmed ahead of time. Principles, but at different octave levels. In this organ, which is characteristic of German Baroque pipe organs, very bright, very crisp, very clean and articulate. This is the sound, identical sound, that possibly Martin Luther would have heard, even though he's earlier than Bach, of course, but we had pipe organs then. But this is the sound that they would have heard in the churches. So that's just the principal family. We have another, the second family is the flute family. So flutes are very prominent on the organ and are not quite as aggressive as the principals. And then, of course, we also have 4-foot flute. And then we could make a 2-foot. Sort of went off the rails there. And so in this piece, the toccata by Pachelbel, this is the same Pachelbel who wrote the canon that you know. At the beginning of the piece will be the principal. We call it the principal chorus. We're just using the principals at different lengths, 8-foot, 4-foot, 2-foot, and there's a thing called a mixture. We won't get into that, but that's also principal sounds. And then halfway through the piece, I will change and use just a chorus of flutes, and I think you'll readily hear that difference. So principal chorus and then flute chorus. So the composer Buxtehude did not live particularly close to where Bach was, but Bach was influenced by his music, and it's a possibility that young Bach had the opportunity to hear Buxtehude play and possibly even have taken a lesson, but whatever, Buxtehude was a very, very strong influence on Bach. So this is a meditative piece on a chorale, and in this I'm going to introduce to you the third category of pipes, which are called reeds, and they're called reeds because they have reeds in them. There is a base that the pipe, the long pipe sits on, but inside that base canister is a metal reed that's very similar to a clarinet reed, bassoon reed, oboe reed, something of that nature, and it vibrates and makes the sound, and it gives a definitive quality to the reed sound. And so some of the reeds are soft and some are loud like trumpets, and we'll hear those later. So in this piece, we're going to hear the crumhorn. And the crumhorn was an ancient instrument that existed at that time period, and people played crumhorns in orchestra and so forth. And so the the organ crumb horn possibly is copied after that. This particular crumb horn on this instrument is made out of copper, which is a very expensive metal, and is somewhat rare to have a copper crumb horn in the pipe organ. So remembering, of course, this was built 50 years ago, so you might not get one of those today. I don't know. So it has a reedy nasal sound. You will know it when you hear it. And then I'm going to accompany that with one flute stop. So this works out well, and there's a wooden flute in the pedal that we add to this. So another reed is the trumpet, and the trumpets are much, much louder and aggressive. This has a really strong trumpet in the great division, which is over there. So this piece is written for a trumpet sound on the organ, plus then something else, and they play a duet back and forth. So sometimes the trumpet has like the treble melody, and then sometimes the trumpet has the part in the bass. At the end, the trumpet plays both parts. So this is another reed stop. So we had principals, flutes, and reeds. So now I want to tell you a story that will lead up, hopefully, to why this 1968 Cassavan organ is unique, special, and you should want to hug it and take care of it all the rest of your life. It begins, though, with a young organist in England, and he had a strange name that the organists don't ever forget. His name was E. Power Biggs, and it's like, out of all your string of names, Power Biggs, because E was Edward, but and then they called him Jim. So I don't know. I don't know exactly how that, but he was quite an accomplished organist and had studied and toured in Europe and Germany and played various organs from Baroque period and so forth. But his dream was to be a concert organist in the United States. And he didn't know exactly how that was going to happen, but he met a musician's agent who was booking a couple of guys, classical musicians, to do a tour of America. And so they added him on the bill. And they came to the United States, it was 1930, and they toured all over, I think, to the West Coast and here and there. He actually made a stop in Raleigh. I don't know at which church, but it was maybe a 90-day tour, 60, 90 days. I don't know. It was an extensive tour. He was so excited, but when it was over, he had this horrible realization. Well, the organs in the United States are just terrible. and he wouldn't even classify them really as organs because they didn't sound anything at all like the organs he had played or the organs in Europe. And it was true. At that time period, most of the pipe organs were reminiscent of theater pipe organs that had been used for silent movies. And even like the Wurlitzer company that built so many of the theater pipe organs converted to building church organs. My first job out of college, I played a Wurlitzer church organ and had a horseshoe console and the whole thing. So they were okay instruments, but they weren't suitable for playing the great organ literature of Bach, and Buxtehude, Pachelbel. And so this was a problem for him. So he decided his next dream was he had to educate America as to what a classic Baroque pipe organ should sound like, and at the same time, learn organ music, literature that was written for organ, rather than playing an orchestra piece on the organ, or playing a pop tune, or just playing a hymn tune on organ, but there's legitimate concert literature written specifically for the organ. So if you don't have an organ, you don't play that. So he settled in Boston, eventually got a position as working as a curator in I think it's a music museum at Harvard University. And within that museum, there was an area for a pipe organ. He had a pipe organ maybe similar in tone quality to this, but not exactly, for a number of years. But he did Sunday morning live radio broadcast. He did recordings back in the days when they were on 78 LPs. Anybody remember those? And but ultimately, he wanted an authentic German Baroque pipe organ in there. And finally, in 1958, D.A. Flintrop from Holland, as an organ builder in Holland, who was also interested in returning to the Baroque period, because even in Germany, the organs had started becoming something else, influenced a lot by the French Romantic, and a lot of the German pipe organs were being thrown in the trash, and Romantic organs of the French type were being installed. So Flintrop in Holland was concerned about, don't let this happen. Let's build pipe organs that use those same principles. The main pipe organ builders that are considered the model for all time was Arp Schnitger, and Andreas Silbermann, and they were both around in the Leipzig area and Middle Germany building pipe organs. And the style that they built, the tonal quality, all of their techniques is what's the pattern, so to speak, is the ultimate model for a Baroque pipe organ. So once he had that instrument installed in his museum, he invited musicians, university professors, organists, people from all over the country to come and hear this. And of course, by this time, he was making all of his recordings of the Bach literature on this organ. I bought all of these when I was in high school, freshman in college. They were on the 33s by that time. I still have them. And so he was a great influence as to getting this information out. And he encouraged and worked with organ builders, which was Schlicker in the United States, and Holtkamp and Cassavant, those three, and also Zimmer later on from Charlotte. And they started offering this type of pipe organ. So obviously, this church committee in the early 60s was influenced by that also, and wanted to get on this trend of having a authentic sounding German Baroque pipe organ. So the Cassavant Company built this in 1968, and this is what you have. And so this is why this is important. Not only is it's a great instrument, but it is an authentic reproduction tonally of those great German pipe organs, and suitable for playing all of the classic Baroque literature. So in this next piece, I'm going to be playing pretty much full, well, not full organ, but the pipes, the original pipes from the 1968 organ, which is what I've been playing so far. But this instrument and the Baroque instruments, they had a very, very large pedal division, a lot of pipes that you can play with your feet, and consequently, composers wrote melodies in the bass. So this is an example of a chorale hymn tune with a lot of stuff going on up top, but the melody is in the bass. In the Bach family, Johann Sebastian Bach's father had been a church musician. Uncles, cousins, anybody who had the name Bach at this time period in Germany, they were musicians, probably associated with some aspect of organ building, church musicians, composers. So Bach grew up surrounded by everything pipe organ. By the time he was 18 years old, he had become proficient in pipe organ building, apparently from a cousin or an uncle who did the same thing, but he became an organ building inspector. At that time, the building of the pipe organs was so important, they wanted to be sure they were going to last for hundreds of years, not fall down. The organ is extremely heavy, and they would be built in rear balconies of churches and cathedrals and so forth. So this was part of Bach's job. It was not just saying, oh, this sounds nice, but he was like a structural engineer. Is this going to sustain the weight, and also was the keyboard action not too stiff, so that some people maybe couldn't play the keyboard because the keys were too hard to press down. Anyhow, he was an organ inspector. So in 1703, he was called to a new church that had just been rebuilt because the old one burnt down. And this is in Arnstadt, Germany. He was 18. He went to inspect the new organ that had been built. And as he was playing and inspecting, the people in the church were so impressed with him, they said, hey, will you stay and be the church organist? And so that he did, and that was his first job. So that's probably where he began with his organ compositions, because now he was playing for church, so he's writing music and this type of thing. So this church is still there, and the pipe organ that he played is still there, and mostly in its original condition. Over the centuries, as they've had to repair and rebuild, they've maintained the exact specifications. And so, and they renamed the church Bach's Church, and they have a statue out front of a young teenage Bach. So the town is very proud of this, and they should be. So this was in Arnstadt in 1703. This possibly is a typical kind of thing Bach would have improvised while testing organs, just set the keys, and we call it noodling, just playing around on the keys. So, as I said, up to this point, everything you have heard has been the original 1968 Casvan pipe organ. All of those sounds were from the pipes, the original pipes. So this next piece, we'll move into using more of the French sound that came after Bach's death. So after Bach died, trends were changing, Bach's music went out of fashion, and organ builders became more experimental, and then there came electricity and things like this, which changed everything, mechanical-wise, sound-wise. And so the character of pipe organs changed considerably from that Baroque sound. So in the year 2016, and I think it started earlier, but was basically finished in 2016, for this organ was the addition of additional sounds, not pipes, but in digital modules, which were actually recordings of pipes from some organ somewhere. And then it's manipulated electronically in the module. And the module is self-contained, has its own speaker, its own little computer chip, and the whole thing is in there. And it plays, though, very similar to pipes. And you'll see in your program on the pipe specification, then the specification of the Walker Technical Company's addition, which makes this organ also extremely unique, because it's what we call a hybrid, but a true hybrid. You've got an original pipe organ and then all of the electronic sounds that have been added. So it's valuable. malfunction. Taking it from the top. Other malfunctions going on here. Not to be defeated again. Hope you like this piece. All right, so we come now to the fourth family of sound on the organ. It's called the strings. They're they're the softest. I don't know, some people describe them as lush, romantic. They're good for accompanying singers, for quiet background music. And of course, they blend in with flutes very well, having flutes and strings, but different combination, but the strings. So you have not heard the strings yet on this organ. And some of these strings are pipes, and some of the strings are from the digital modules. So in January of this year, Paul Fey, the young composer in Germany, offered to write a composition for me based on a tune that I would submit to him. And so I gave him this Shogun lullaby, this Welsh folk song. He never heard it, knew nothing about it, and within a few hours, he gave me this piece. So a trio is three of anything. So an organ trio is going to be three parts, usually right hand, left hand, and feet. And so in this next piece, we're going to bring back that somewhat aggressive trumpet that we had before for the melody. And I want to use some flutes as the accompaniment. But that's not enough. And so I'm skipping the 4-foot flute and the 2-foot flute, and I'm going to a 1-foot flute. And this really bright sound. And push the right button. Yes. And then there's sort of a string bass kind of thing happening in the pedal. So are you beginning to recognize the different categories of sound on the organ, especially in solo things? So this next one is called tuba tune. We don't have a tuba, but we're going to imagine we have one. And so the tuba is a reed stop, sort of like a trombone sounds, and is bigger and lower than the trumpet. So just taken that trumpet, that brassy trumpet, and added some lower things with it, and in combination, we will pretend that we have the tuba.
asked Bo earlier this afternoon if we could have a little interlude here. Not only is this afternoon a celebration of music and of this wonderful Cassavant organ, but it is also a celebration and a moment to pause and say thank you to Bo for his music ministry here since earlier this year, January of 2022. Bo came out of retirement in some ways. As you can see in his bio, he has been playing music in churches since he was 16 years old. But for a variety of reasons and COVID and retirement, he had been out of church music for a little while. And Seek and Ye Shall Find, Scott Merrill and Alec Peters were part of Seeking and Finding, and it has been a wonderful season of ministry, of music ministry here at West Raleigh. As you can see and as you have experienced, Bo's love of music and of the organ is infectious. So on behalf of all of us, don't clap yet, we're going to say a few more words first. Bo, thank you.
Well, you know, Bo, here at West Raleigh, sometimes we get blessings beyond what we might have imagined. We just are hearing one right now, an amazing concert, the result of a lifetime of work, and extraordinary talent by another blessing, you. Sometimes I think that maybe God helps us just get lucky. While I like to think of ourselves as visionary, the simple truth is that when I placed that call to you on our behalf in early January to see if you might be interested in joining us here at West Raleigh, I had no idea, none of us did, what an amazing array of musical blessings were headed our way. While my perspective is certainly colored by my participation in our music ministry as a member of the choir, my colleague Alec will be sharing our view of the 9 months we've spent singing together, so I'm not going to cross over into his swim lane, although I am tempted. Instead, I want to explain a perspective that I've heard by many folks here who do not sing in the choir, but love the music of this church. Some of them sit in the pews, and others can't easily get here for worship, so they watch and listen on live stream. And as I listen to them, and I think about these 9 months that you've been in our midst, a couple of things jump out at me. The first is how much you taught us and brought us along with you as you explored this magnificent Cassavant organ. Now let me see if I got this right from the math of the young Christians last week. I think I heard is it 2,745 different sounds that this instrument can produce? It's something like that. That's the calculation. I'm sticking to it. I'm not going to argue with the young Christians. You know, who would imagine, right? Who would imagine? Probably none of us sitting out here think about that number of sounds. But what I've heard repeatedly from this church family is how the organ somehow sounds different when you play. There are a lot of reasons for that, I believe, but the one that stands out the most is this: how much joy you receive in playing it and how that joy comes across in the music to all of us. You can't sit out here and not feel it. Whether it's a hymn, a prelude, a postlude, or an anthem, doesn't matter. The joy shines through it. It's just a great gift. The second thing that has become more and more apparent to me over these 9 months is hard to describe, but it's really easy to feel. I think of it like this. For a lot of folks, there is an inextricable linkage between the sound of this magnificent instrument and that little place down in our soul where God lives. As the music swirls through this sanctuary, we won't know exactly what ranks are deployed or what stops are engaged, but we all know how it feels. Those feelings run deep. Some of those 2,745 sounds inspire us and help us look forward. And others are linked to our memory's treasure as we think back to so many meaningful times that took place in this sanctuary. But whether happy times or ones dealing with grief, the music from this organ and the comfort to our souls that it offered was the one musical constant through the years. It never changed. Your artistry and your teaching reminds us of that. Another great gift, and with it a profound sense of gratitude to this wonderful instrument and this musical legacy and view, bringing our remembrance of it. So this grateful church family wanted to provide you with a couple of gifts as small tokens of our thanks and appreciation for these 9 months. Inasmuch as you are truly an artist extraordinary, it seemed only fitting that the first gift was handcrafted by one of the members of the arts ministry. My favorite member of the ministry, I might add. So, Bo, I'd like to present this to you on behalf of our church family. Sure. Don't drop it. Don't drop it. But we're not done. There's still time. And our second gift, in a true West Raleigh fashion, is what can best be described as an adventure. It goes like this. Over these 9 months, we have been treated to the compositions of the young and extraordinarily talented composer and organist Paul Fee of Leipzig, Germany. Through the preludes and the postludes and your stories about your collaborations with Paul, it seems like we've kind of gotten to know him. So it took little imagination on the part of some of us to determine that the perfect gift for you was to engage him to compose a piece in honor of this day. And we would then present the piece to you now. There was only one small problem with this plan. Paul beat us to the punch. God of grace and God of glory that you're about to hear is simply spectacular and a fitting tribute to your ministry that he gave you for this day. So, we had to go to plan B. Inasmuch as you've brought Paul and his music to us over these months, we decided we'd return the favor, and we're going to bring Paul to you. So we've created a fund in your honor to defray Paul's expenses and also those of his significant other to travel here to Raleigh and play a concert for us on this organ. I have a feeling he might have heard a thing or two about it. While this was designed to be a gift for you, the reality is it's really a gift to all of us. First, it gets Paul here to play, and we get to meet him. But more importantly, it gets you back here to participate with us. And given that Paul is not so keen on lots of public speaking in English, you'll have to cover that one for him. Besides, mein Deutsch ist nicht gut. Like all good West Raleigh adventures, we start out with a vision and then we go from there. So the details on this will have to be worked. Oh, and by the way, Paul doesn't know a thing about this yet. That's just part of the adventure and kind of how we roll. But we hope, Paul, if you're out there, you now know. Bo, on behalf of all of us who have been here and the beneficiaries of your kindness, generosity of time and spirit, artistry and gift of music, we thank you. You should always think of this church as your home and as that organ as part of your life. We wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you and Godspeed.
And Bo, on behalf of the choir, I have a little bit more. Catherine mentioned the pandemic and the effect that it had on lots of people, and including you, and the ability to get out and play and be where organ is played. I think I speak for everybody in the choir when I say that one of the hardest things about the pandemic was not being able to sing with each other. That is just such a part of life that it was very difficult not to be able to get together and sing. It was also very difficult not to be able to get together with each other. I am convinced from what I have seen through my life that there is rarely a group in any church that is as close-knit and that cares about each other and that has as much fun as the choir does. We try not to do too much of the fun and playfulness on Sunday morning, but sometimes we can't help it. You, in talking to the choir Thursday night at the end of our last rehearsal together, commented how you could feel right when you came that this was a family. This choir is a family. And we want you to be absolutely certain that you are very much a part of that family. And as Scott said, you always have a home here, and we will always be glad to see you come home here. So we have this. I won't say what it is until you've opened it, because that kind of gives it away. You can read the card later. You don't need to take time and do that.
It's lovely.
This is part of keeping it in the family. This is a piece of art from another member of our arts ministry, Marty Lemming, who's sitting over here, that hangs up in the stairwell where the choir walks by it every time we go to the choir room or the robe room, which we used to be able to do, and maybe we'll be able to do one day again. And it is of a setting of the Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, that Tom Lohr wrote for the choir. So we wanted you to have a copy of that, a print of that, to remember us by. And like I say, we look forward to seeing you back here whenever you can come.
Thank you for the honors and the kind words and the recognition. But you know, this has just been so much fun for me. Pipe organs just have a personality, and you either blend. It's like people. You find a person whose personality complements yourself, then you become good friends. And so pipe organs are that same way. So I have really enjoyed getting to know this guy and feel like he's a close friend for me. It takes an organist a while to learn everything, and I'm still learning more about the organ, but it's been so much fun. I haven't played a whole lot of organs in my life. Most of my church jobs, you know, lasted 10 or 12, 15 years, so you can't get too many of those in your lifetime. But this has been the best organ experience of my lifetime. So it was a treat for me, so thank you for having me. So these final two pieces are of Paul Fye again. You can read about him on the back of your program. You probably already have. But I don't know, several weeks ago, we chat occasionally on WhatsApp, but not very often. It's usually I have a question for him and he will respond. But he asked me 2 or 3 weeks ago, did I have a suggestion for composition? And I said, and I just happened to have been thinking about asking him at some point to do something with God of Grace and God of Glory. It's such a great hymn, and it's also a Welsh tune, and my Lloyd ancestors are Welsh, so it has a double meaning for me. And not only to write something, but to write in a particular style. So in Holland, the Dutch organists do a lot of improvisations on their favorite hymns in Holland. And so I asked him if he would do this in the Dutch improvisation style. So this piece is, and it's 5 parts. The first part is the hymn tune in a more meditative, quiet style. And then the second version is a trio. Do you remember a trio? There are three parts, and there's a pedal part doing sort of a string bass kind of thing every now and then. There is a melody playing that's mostly the melody that you know, and then there is like something with flutes. I don't know exactly what it is, but you will sort of imagine you hear the melody in that part. And if you are pure of heart, you will hear angels. So don't tell anybody if you don't hear them. Thank you.
Again, I hope you'll join us in the courtyard for some fellowship afterwards.